Good morning, all. As we enter into this all Zoom service, please note that you've been muted by our host. Also, be advised that this service is being recorded and, with the exception of joys and concerns, will be published online. Finally, if you wish, take a moment to arrange your own chalice at home. Return to the most human. Nothing less will nourish the torn spirit. The bewildered heart, the angry mind, and from the ultimate duress, pierced with the breath of anguish, speak of love. Return to the deep sources. Nothing less will teach the stiff hands a new way to serve, to carve into our lives the forms of tenderness and still that ancient necessary pain preserve. Return to the most human. Nothing less will teach the angry spirit, the bewildered heart, the torn mind to accept the whole of its duress and pierced with anguish at last act for love. That was from the poetry of May Sarton. I will light the chalice here in my sanctuary today. I invite you to light your own chalice and place it where it can be seen by all of us. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in the celebration of the life we share together. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind you to leave yourselves muted. However, we want you and whoever is with you to sing with Mary as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. Please sing the opening hymn, Morning Has Broken, number 3. Thank you, Mary. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community of Cambria. We're glad you've joined us today. Our UUCC sanctuary sits on land which the Salinan and Chumash indigenous peoples historically inhabited. We honor their contribution to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to gather as a faith community on their unceded ancestral lands. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation run by the democratic process. We invite speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest to our community that connect with the UU 7 principles. Today's service centers around the fourth principle. We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. My name is Dolores Miera, and I'm your worship associate this morning. I'd like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you've joined us this morning. We'll give you a big wave. Hello. If you are not on our mailing list, please visit the UUCC website at www.uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all of our activities. And please check out what's happening, a weekly e-blast sent to all members and friends. This is a great way to keep up with the latest news in this community. As a reminder, if you wish to see this or any of the past Zoom services again, recordings of these services can be found on the UUCC website and Facebook as well. The membership committee invites non-members to consider joining our community. Please contact Diane DeMarco or a person on the board if you're interested in joining us. Thank you. So again, good morning and welcome to everyone. The affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of this community as well as a promise we make to aspire to. Let us now recite the UUCC affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. We set aside this time for any short announcements that will be of interest to our UU community member and friends. Please keep members and friends, please keep your items short and to the point. For any items that need more explanation, please call or email the person after the service to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have an announcement, please raise your Zoom hand, and when Randy calls your name, please unmute yourself, then speak.
Okay, I'm going to go first and announce that tomorrow at 5 o'clock is our monthly worship committee meeting. So please be there if you're on the committee at 5 o'clock via Zoom. If you wish to join us, you're all welcome to. Just let me know via email and I'll send you the link and we're good to go from there. Okay, I see Judy's hand is up. Judy, please unmute yourself and share with us your announcement.
Okay, I'll just follow up with what was said prior to the service. The garage sale is back on. I'm sorry that it has been a bouncing ball, but when I asked who might be interested, I had a very poor response. But since then, people have come forward. So we're going to do it. June 11th, Saturday in my driveway. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I am not seeing any other hands going once. Okay, let's see. Nope. All right, I'm going to send it back over to you, Dolores.
Okay. Next week, Jan Musara will host Scholarship Sunday, building a new world in which, excuse me, 10 graduates from Coast Union High School and Leffingwell will be honored. And now, a message from the board. Tom.
Hello, my name is Tom Harris, member at large of the Board of Trustees of UUCC. The board met on Monday, May 23rd. Janet Cooper reported just under $39,000 in our checking account and well over $59,000 in our savings. 53% of all 2022 pledge donations have been received. Although April showed a negative revenue, year to date, we are just over $9.8 thousand in the positive. Regarding utilities, Janet suggested performing an all expense audit comparing pre-COVID versus after COVID usage. Regarding termites, our current insurance does not cover for infestations. It was made known that termite insurance does exist at a potential new expense. The UUA provides loans to its member churches for remodeling to repair infestations. We're still searching for another person to join the audiovisual team so that when both Andy and Randy are unavailable, we can still hold hybrid services. The June meeting has been canceled. The next meeting of the UU Board of Trustees is scheduled for July 18th at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Tom. Sharing together some of our personal and significant joys and concerns brings us closer as a faith community. We invite you to share the milestones that are deeply felt as part of your personal life, along with expressions of gratitude or acknowledgement. But please be mindful and considerate of all who come to worship this morning. This is a time of community building. The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and sorrows which may have gone unspoken today, but are also deeply felt in this community. From Matthew chapter 6, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Let us join in a time of meditation, of prayer, and of silence. Let us seek the quiet and the calm, laying aside our struggles. And in the silence, may there be a reverence in our hearts, a thankfulness within our spirit, and a deepened understanding of the meaning of our lives. Let us enter the stillness. Quiet your quiet, excuse me. Quiet your active mind. Soothe your troubled heart. Connect your incorporeal soul. Ignite your dormant spirit. Reach beyond your essence to find your inner peace. The second reading is from Walden by Henry David Thoreau from the chapter Where I Lived and What I Lived For. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, confront only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live that I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner, and to reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world? Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account in my next excursion. The anthem today is Quite Early Morning by Pete Seeger and will be sung by Reverend Ken Reed Brown.
Muted. Good morning, good afternoon from here, where it's afternoon. It's good to be with you again, third time, I think. And thank you for your warm welcome. Randy, for your Zoom leadership, Dolores hosting, and our musicians. It's wonderful to be with you again. And I want to point out that the beautiful photograph that you saw during our meditation, Randy found online somewhere. It's a photograph from a place called World's End here in Hingham, and you're looking out over a bay and the town of Hull and then the Atlantic Ocean. My wife and I are there often. Quite early morning. Yeah, there it is again. Thank you, Randy. A place of peace and beauty. Quite Early Morning was written by Pete Seeger quite some decades ago. It applies to just about any time, any morning. And I think certainly applies to this week, these weeks that we've been living, and these times in which we live. There are two lines that we'll repeat, and I invite you to join in the second time through. You will get what I mean as we go along. Quite early morning. Don't you know it's darkest before the dawn? And it's this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now. Quite early morning, if we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, the time is now. Quite early morning. Some say that humankind won't long endure. But what makes them so doggone sure? I know that you, who hear my singing, could make those freedom bells go ringing. I know that you, who hear my singing, could make those freedom bells go ringing. And so we keep on while we live, until we have no more to give. And when these fingers can strum no longer, hand the old banjo to young ones stronger. And when these fingers can strum no longer, hand the old banjo to young ones stronger. So though it's darkest before the dawn, these thoughts keep us moving on through all this world of joy and sorrow. We still can have singing tomorrow through all this world of joy and sorrow. We still can have singing tomorrow. Don't you know it's darkest before the dawn? And it's this thought keeps me moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. Quite early morning.
Thank you, Ken. That was today's sermon is titled Touchstones to be Delivered by Reverend Ken Reed Brown. Reverend Ken Reed Brown has been the minister of First Parish in Hingham Old Ship Church, Unitarian Universalist, since 1987. Prior to his settlement, Ken served as Associate Director of Cambridge Forum and Assistant Minister at First Parish in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Ken was born and raised on Long Island, New York. He's a graduate of Haverford College, from which he received a BA in philosophy, and of Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, from which he received a Master's of Divinity degree. Before entering Starr King, Ken taught music at a school for severely learning disabled children. He lives in Hingham with his wife, Susan. They have 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren. Ken will be retiring as of July 31st, 2022. Ken, please welcome Ken.
Thank you, Dolores. Thanks very much. Once again, really good to be with you all. I'll play with my screen here. There we go. So the sermon is Touchstones. Before I begin formally, I want to acknowledge the week that we've just lived through, really the 2 weeks of tragic shootings and, of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine. These are challenging times, and to say the least. I believe this theme of touchstones, we always need touchstones to keep us balanced, if you will. And so I hope that my words this morning will be healing and helpful during these times, especially. So what is a touchstone? For the last several years, I've used the word for myself to describe those passages and quotes, things I've read, whether ancient or modern words, that I have found myself returning to over and over again, over years, decades in some cases. These are passages or words that have been grounding to me, or inspiring or healing, words that in one way or another have been helpful companions in my life journey and in my ministry. More technically, the word touchstone, I finally looked it up once, is a dark-colored stone of some sort. Could be slate or a field stone that's used to test a precious metal, be it gold or silver. Metaphorically, Wikipedia, that source of all wisdom, tells us that a touchstone refers to any physical or intellectual measure by which the validity or merit of a concept can be tested. So following the metaphor, the touchstone is not itself the precious metal, when understood literally, nor is it itself the concept, when understood metaphorically. So when it comes not to geology but to life, I suppose the precious metal is the truth which may often be beyond words. One of my touchstone passages or lines comes from the opening of the Tao Te Ching. Some of you may be familiar with it. Begins that the Tao, the way, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, beyond words. Now, in this morning's reading, the second reading from Henry David Thoreau's Walden, we heard one of my touchstone passages. Maybe it's been a touchstone passage for some of you. Read a long time ago. The guy was only 30 years old when he wrote these words, but they have wisdom beyond his age. After all, Jesus was only in his 30s. Buddha was only in his 30s or less, younger when he was so-called enlightened. In any case, these lines from where I lived and what I lived for began, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. And not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. So it seems to me that Thoreau was saying that his 2 years by Walden Pond, that's how most of us know him. He was a guy who lived by Walden Pond. He was only there for 2 years. But they were intended for him to be a touchstone for his living, a place and a time to test, so to speak, as he said in that reading, to test the meaning of life. My father, a surgeon who also was fond of Thoreau and Walden, said on a number of occasions that for him it was the operating room that was his Walden, if you will. He went into medicine and then eventually surgery because he thought that he might learn something about life in the midst of it, and he knew he would be doing something worth doing, something valuable for others. For me, it has been here in this meeting house, here as minister of Old Ship Church for half of my life, these last 35 years. This has been my Walden for the last 35 years. Quite a different setting amidst a full life of a congregation than Thoreau's cabin by the pond. He had 1 chair for solitude, he said, 2 chairs for two for company, and 3 for society. So we think of Thoreau as a hermit, but he wasn't. He wanted to live a life of simplicity amidst an outward civilization. And in fact, he had lots of visitors. People were curious. He had lots of visitors while he was at the cabin, and he went back to Walden Pond to Concord for meals, for his mother to do his laundry. And some people criticize him for that. He was trying to live a simple life in the midst of outward civilization. He was known for leading huckleberry expeditions. He was part of skating. Ice skating was all the thing back then. He went to skating parties with people like Emerson and Hawthorne, and his daily walks were often with another companion. But back to the quote, it seems to me it's a particularly good example of a touchstone passage, and here's why. Thoreau was writing about his own quest for touchstones, hoping that by reducing his daily life to its simplest terms, he might discover what his and life in general was all about. At the same time, he was certainly quite aware, and he was writing for an audience. He hoped. He was quite aware that his experiment might serve others who would be drawn into a similar quest by young Thoreau's declaration. Now, I've never lived for 2 years or even 2 days by the side of a pond in solitude, not at all, but I have lived with books by my side, many of them purporting to hold life wisdom, passages within books, touchstones against which I've measured my own experience, my own life. Thoreau did this too, and not only during those 2 years by Walden Pond. He was really quite a scholar, reading. Of course, if you went to Harvard, which he did, you had to read things in Latin and Greek. He and others of the Transcendentalists were reading some of the early translations of so-called Eastern texts, the Bhagavad Gita and others. But here's what he said, because he did read a lot by Walden Pond. Here's what he said in the 3rd chapter of Walden, which is titled Reading. He wrote, "My residence," meaning his cabin, "my residence was more favorable not only to thought, but to serious reading than a university. And though I was beyond the range of the ordinary circulating library, I had more than ever come within the influence of those books which circulate around the world." He meant, of course, the classics, and not only Greek and Roman, but those newly translated Hindu and Persian and Buddhist texts. And of all these sorts of texts, he wrote later in the same chapter, by such a pile, we may hope to scale heaven at last. He went on, there are probably words addressed to our condition exactly, which, if we could really hear and understand them, would be more salutary than the morning or the spring of our lives, and probably put a new aspect on the face of things for us. How many a person has dated a new era in his life, he didn't know about inclusive language, from the reading of a book. And this is precisely what I'm talking about today. Sometimes there's words that we read that are so powerful that they're life-changing for us. I expect you've had that experience. So this is not about, this morning, just sharing my touchstones. It's an invitation for you to reflect on your own. And it might not be a book or a quote. It might be a piece of music or a work of art that has somehow inspired you, touched you, moved you, given you a sense of what your life, of what life is all about, and may have dated a new era in your life at some point, as Thoreau said. Well, all this said, I want to share a few more tastes of my pages and pages, I've compiled them, of touchstone texts gathered over the decades, not through some grand ambition to compile this library of wisdom, but organically as passages or quotes came to me and have stayed with me. Emerson, within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. Or again, Thoreau, only that day dawns to which we are awake. Or Whitman, not exactly a transcendentalist, but similar, same era, who said, I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. Well, I can go on and on with passages from Whitman. Or from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And, as you heard, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And as I often remind my congregation, most religious language is metaphor. Translate heaven, translate God, however you will. Oops. There we go. Or from the East, so-called East, the Hindu Upanishads, perennial joy or passing pleasure, this is the choice one is to make always. Or from the Bhagavad Gita, you have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. You should never engage in action for the sake of reward, nor should you long for inaction. Perform work in this world as one established within oneself, without selfish attachments, and alike in success and defeat. That's a tough one. Alike in success and defeat. Carry on. Or the Buddhist Dhammapada, one of the oldest Buddhist texts. Hatred, oh boy, we need this. Hatred can never put an end to hatred. Love alone can. This is an unalterable law. The text goes on. People forget that their lives will end soon. For those who remember, quarrels come to an end. Or the Sufi poet Rumi. Many of you probably know this. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And this also from Rumi. I go into the Muslim mosque, the Jewish synagogue, and the Christian church, and I see one altar. Or moving to our own times, Mary Oliver, you may know this one too, at the end of her poem, The Summer Day. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Or the poet Denise Levertov. We have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. So much is in bud. You can find that, the full text, in our hymn book. And so many, many more. Lines such as these that have become part of the warp and woof of my life, informing my musings, many of which I've shared in sermons or classes over the decades of my ministry, having to do with what this mystery we call life might be all about. And over time, I've come to realize that these touchstone passages, which maybe at first sight may seem a little bit random and disparate, there are threads, to mix a metaphor, there are threads which connect the touchstones, and I believe test even the times in which we are now living, with democracy threatened at home and abroad, ongoing brutality and cruelty of war, the crisis of climate, and of course, these brutal mass murders. So there are threads, and here are some of them that I've discerned. You may have discerned them as I was speaking, those few touchstones that I've discerned from my touchstones that I find, if anything, to be more important in times such as these. I don't believe they are trivial affirmations or wishful thinking, but rather bits of essential wisdom gleaned from souls wiser than I. Here, in my own words, some of the threads. First, as best we can, stay awake and pay attention. Mary Oliver said attention is her form of prayer. And notice, among other things, that though we might wish or otherwise, life includes not only beauty and wonder, but also suffering and sorrow, including too often meanness and what can only be called evil. And at the same time, notice that life is short, but love is long. So be kind. It really matters and spreads. Seek justice and peace. It really matters and it spreads. And good news, I would affirm that we enter the kingdom of heaven, or nirvana, by whatever name, with every kind word or helpful healing deed. Another thread, the goal of a truly meaningful life is not getting and spending fame and fortune and power, but rather presence, wisdom, compassion. And we can manifest such qualities because we are individual manifestations of the whole, of cosmos, of the interdependent web of the divine, whatever word you choose to use, of universe. And more good news, there are paths on which we can journey towards this kind of wakefulness, this fundamental identity, well-worn paths that we can make our own through personal practice and selfless service, remaining unattached to fruits and outcomes with faith that our seemingly small deeds on behalf of goodness and right do matter and ripple outwards. And finally, lest much of this seem out of reach, there is deep virtue in patience. This means, among other things, that there's no need to worry too much about things that we can't change or don't feel we can control. As Rainer Maria Rilke wrote among his letters to a young poet, Rilke himself was only 30, writing to an 18-year-old poet. And these are touchstone words that I carried in my wallet years ago for a long time. He wrote, "Be patient to all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." Well, that seems like good advice to all of us, whatever our stage of life. Well, this is only the beginning of threads among my touchstones, and surely if any of these affirmations are shared in congregations such as mine or yours, it might help carry us into the future, a better future. Seems to me that these are this call to wake up to beauty, kindness, and love, call to wake up to our common humanity, all of this leading to the call to do what we can in the direction of peace, of justice, of freedom, of living sustainably on our earth home. Well, my journey with texts, ancient and modern, my journey of conversation about things that matter, conversation about these things, so that we might better lead lives that matter, will continue, as does yours, each of ours, whoever we are, in our rich and wonderful Unitarian Universalist communities of kindness and love, communities of faith that do, and I know will continue to make a difference on behalf of the flourishing of all life in this world of joy and sorrow woven fine. We do make a difference together. May it long be so. Blessed be.
Thank you, Ken. The morning offering will now be given and received. Please remember that we are a self-sustaining congregation and provide all financial resources for our many ministries. Recognize the spiritual value of generosity and invite you to participate. Please use one of the methods shown on the screen. Thank you. Our thanks for all gifts given and received for the work of this community. Let us now sing the doxology.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue.
Please sing the closing hymn, How Can I Keep From Singing, number 108.
Yeah. Go.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Let us now recite the valediction. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice as the light of this faith lives on in us, together, in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Please extinguish your chalice at home now. After the benediction, we encourage you to stay for questions and comments. Randy will call on you when you raise your Zoom hand. Ken. Whoops, Ken, still not.
Unmute. Am I unmuted? Yes. Will you seek afar off, in things better to you, finding the best, or as good as the best? In folks nearest to you, finding also the sweetest and strongest and lovingest. It's not in another place, but this place, not for another hour, but this hour. These words from Walt Whitman. As we go forth, grateful for the blessings of our lives, may we turn and make of our lives a blessing to all life. Blessed be. Amen.